They searched for happiness in wealth, but their hearts remained empty. They chased pleasure, yet felt more lost than ever. In the silence of their success, they heard a whisper, a call from the one they had forgotten, and that call led them to Islam. When you look at the modern Western world, you see everything that promises happiness, wealth, fame, education, and comfort. Yet behind the glamorous surface lies a generation drowning in loneliness and depression. People have the freedom to do anything they want, but not the peace to enjoy any of it. Their hearts are restless, their souls are tired, and their minds are constantly searching for meaning in a world that denies God. They have reached the peak of material success, but the lowest point of spiritual clarity. And it is precisely in this emptiness that many hearts begin to awaken. They start to question, why, with everything around me, do I still feel something missing inside? That question becomes the spark that leads them to Islam. Islam answers the deepest cry of the human heart, not just how to live, but why to live. It gives purpose where the world gives confusion, peace where the world gives anxiety, and direction where the world gives distraction. This is why thousands of Westerners are finding themselves drawn not to another trend or ideology, to a divine truth that has remained unchanged for over 1400 years. The beauty of this awakening lies in its sincerity. Many of these individuals never intended to become Muslim. Some studied Islam only to criticize it, yet ended up falling in love with its wisdom. Others witnessed the patience and peace of Muslims during hardship and wondered, what gives them that strength? The more they studied, the more they realized that Islam is not a religion of blind faith, but of balance and reason. It harmonizes the heart and the mind, the body and the soul. In a world that glorifies the self, Islam liberates the self, teaching that true freedom is not in following every desire, but in submitting to the one who created desire. In a culture obsessed with constant change, Islam offers eternal stability. The message of La ilaha illallah, there is no God but Allah, touches the deepest layer of the human being, reminding them of a truth they always knew, but had forgotten. This remembrance brings tears to their eyes and peace to their hearts, because the soul finally finds its home. Westerners who embrace Islam often describe it as a rebirth, not into a new culture, but into truth itself. They begin to see life differently. Success is no longer about money or status, but about sincerity and submission. They find beauty in prayer, power in patience, and honor in modesty. They learn that happiness is not the absence of pain, but the presence of purpose. Their hearts, once filled with confusion, now become filled with light. And this transformation doesn't just affect individuals, it shakes entire societies. It challenges the false idea that faith is outdated or restrictive. Through their journey, they prove that Islam is not a religion of the East or the past. It is a universal message for every soul in every time. It is the answer to the modern crisis of meaning. This movement of hearts toward Islam is not random. It is part of a divine pattern, a reminder that truth cannot be silenced, even in an age of noise. When people are stripped of peace, they begin to seek it sincerely, and Allah guides whom He wills. Each new believer becomes a light in a world of darkness, a proof that no matter how far one strays, the door of guidance remains open. The more the world tries to bury the truth, the more it shines. The rise of Islam in Western minds is a sign that humanity is rediscovering what it lost, connection to the Creator. And as more hearts return to Allah, they are discovering what success truly means, not owning the world, but finding peace with the one who owns it all. In a world that boasts progress, freedom, and intellectual advancement, many Western minds are beginning to awaken to an undeniable truth: that material comfort has failed to satisfy the soul. The shelves are full of self-help books, the streets filled with entertainment, and the internet overflowing with voices promising happiness. Yet the human heart continues to ache. Depression, anxiety, and loneliness are at their highest, not in poor societies, but in the wealthiest and most educated nations. People have built magnificent cities, but they cannot build peace within themselves. They have conquered the external world, but lost the internal one. And in this vast emptiness, the soul begins to question everything it has been taught. Is this really all there is to life? That question, born from pain, becomes the spark that leads many Westerners to search beyond the physical world, beyond science, beyond pleasure, for something eternal, something real. They start to look toward faith, toward spirituality, toward the one who designed their hearts. And in that journey, many find Islam. They find a faith that does not ask them to abandon reason, but to perfect it. A faith that does not divide science and spirituality, but harmonizes them. Islam does not promise an escape from life struggles, but a deeper understanding of them. It tells man that his pain has purpose, his existence has meaning, And his heart was never meant to be filled with the world. It was meant to remember Allah. When Western thinkers read the Quran for the first time, many describe a moment of silence that penetrates the soul, verses that speak to their deepest questions, words that touch wounds they never knew they had. They realize that Islam does not speak in the language of culture or time, it speaks in the language of truth. It reminds them that true peace is not in pleasure, but in surrender, not in control, but in connection. For so long, they were told to seek freedom by doing whatever they desired, yet that freedom only enslaved them to their own whims and fears. Islam, in its simplicity and depth, redefines what freedom means. It teaches that to be truly free, one must be free from everything but Allah, and this realization changes everything. It replaces confusion with clarity, emptiness with peace, and despair with purpose. It transforms their view of success from chasing wealth and status to chasing sincerity and nearness to God. The West, despite its external brilliance, is beginning to realize that the heart does not survive on luxury, but on faith. And so, quietly but steadily, minds are turning, hearts are awakening, and souls are returning to the timeless truth that only in the remembrance of Allah do hearts find rest. As more people in the West begin to question the meaning of their existence, they find themselves surrounded by a culture that glorifies the self but neglects the soul. From a young age, they are taught that success is defined by what they achieve, how much they own, and how they appear to others. They are told to pursue dreams that often end up becoming cages of exhaustion, comparison, and inner emptiness. The constant race to be better, richer, and more admired leaves them drained, their hearts numb and disconnected. In this endless pursuit of self-gratification, they lose sight of who they are and why they exist. And when the illusions of success fade, they are left with silence, a silence filled with questions that no amount of money or fame can answer. In this silence, a small voice within whispers that there must be more. It is this whisper that begins the journey toward truth. And for many, that journey leads to Islam. They begin to encounter a message that feels both ancient and fresh, both logical and spiritual. It tells them that their worth is not determined by their achievements, but by their Creator. It teaches them that life is not a random accident, but a sacred trust. It explains that every difficulty, every heartbreak, and every loss has a divine purpose behind it. This perspective reshapes their understanding of life completely. They start to see that what they thought was freedom, the ability to do whatever they want, was actually a form of slavery to the self, to society, and to desire. Islam shows them that real freedom is found not in rebelling against divine guidance, but in surrendering to it. It is through this surrender that the human being finds balance, dignity, and peace. When they read the Quran, they are moved by its words that speak to both intellect and emotion, reason and revelation. They find in it a mirror reflecting the reality of the human condition, its weaknesses, its hopes, and its potential. And they realize that this book was not written by men trying to make sense of life, but by the one who created life itself. The beauty of Islam is that it does not demand a blind following. It invites reflection. It welcomes questioning because it knows that the truth can stand on its own. Western minds, trained to analyze and reason, find in Islam a perfect harmony between logic and faith. They see that the Quran does not dismiss science or progress, but places them within a higher framework, one that connects knowledge to purpose. They discover that Islam does not divide the world into sacred and secular, but teaches that every act, when done with the right intention, can become an act of worship. Whether one is studying, working, or raising a family, everything can be infused with spiritual meaning. This realization fills the emptiness they once felt because their daily lives now have eternal significance. They begin to feel a peace that is not dependent on circumstances, but flows from within, from a connection with their Creator that cannot be shaken by the chaos of the world. They find in prayer a refuge, in remembrance a healing, and in submission a power they never knew existed. What once felt like losing control now feels like gaining it, not control over life's events, but over the heart's reaction to them. Islam gives them a way to live that nourishes both the body and the soul, balancing intellect and emotion, ambition and humility. This transformation is not just emotional, it is spiritual and intellectual. It is as if they have woken from a long sleep, seeing the world not through the lens of ego, but through the light of divine truth. And this light reveals that happiness was never found in possessions or status, but in proximity to the one who gives meaning to everything. As they walk this new path, they realize that they are not escaping their culture, but elevating it, moving from confusion to clarity, from chaos to calm, and from self-worship to divine love. As the light of understanding begins to reach their hearts, those who once saw Islam through the distorted lens of the media start to see it for what it truly is, a way of life built on peace, mercy, and balance. They realize that much of what they had been told about Islam was shaped by fear and misinformation designed to keep them away from the truth. But truth, by its nature, remain hidden forever. The more they study, the more they see how Islam answers the questions that no philosophy, no psychology, and no political ideology has ever been able to answer. It addresses not just the mind, but the heart, not just society, but the individual soul. It offers a complete worldview that gives meaning to everything, from the smallest act of kindness to the greatest trials of life. They find it remarkable that Islam provides guidance for every stage of human existence: birth, growth, love, loss, and death. It does not leave a person wandering in confusion. It gives them a map that leads directly to peace. And what makes this peace so powerful is that it does not depend on external conditions. Even in suffering, a believer finds purpose, because Islam teaches that hardship is not punishment, but purification. When Western minds grasp this concept, it changes how they see their own struggles. Instead of viewing pain as something meaningless, they begin to see it as a form of growth, a lesson from the divine. This shift in perspective heals wounds that no therapy could. It gives them the strength to endure without despair, to hope without fear, and to live without arrogance. It reconnects them to their true identity, not as random beings in a chaotic universe, but as souls with divine purpose and dignity. As they continue to learn, they discover that Islam's moral structure is not restrictive, but protective. What the modern world calls freedom often leads to the destruction of morality and the breaking of families, but Islam safeguards both. It honors the family, uplifts women, protects children, and places justice at the heart of society. This is not a man-made system. It is divine wisdom shaped by the one who knows his creation better than they know themselves. The more they observe how these values bring peace to the soul, the more they understand that the chaos around them is a result of turning away from this divine order. They see that societies which abandon spiritual guidance eventually lose direction, collapsing under the weight of their own desires. In contrast, Islam builds a foundation where spiritual growth and social harmony go hand in hand. It does not separate the sacred from the everyday. It integrates both, creating a life that is meaningful from every angle. For those who embrace Islam, this realization becomes a form of healing. It feels like returning home after being lost for years. The prayers become moments of intimacy with their creator. The Quran becomes their compass, and every act of goodness becomes a step toward eternal success. They feel a calmness that cannot be explained by science, a light that fills the emptiness they once tried to fill with the world. It is the peace of knowing that they belong to something greater than themselves, a divine story where every chapter, even the painful ones, has purpose. And in that peace, they begin to see life with new eyes. The same world that once looked chaotic now looks beautiful because they finally understand its purpose. The same challenges that once broke them now strengthen their faith. They realize that Islam does not take away their individuality, it refines it. It gives them clarity in an age of confusion, humility in an age of arrogance, and stability in an age of change. What they once thought was submission turns out to be empowerment. For the first time, they are not living to impress the world, they are living to please their creator. They no longer feel the need to chase validation because they know their worth in the eyes of Allah is infinite. They understand that peace was never something to be found in the outside world. It was something to be unlocked within the heart through remembrance of the divine. This realization becomes the turning point of their lives, the moment when everything begins to make sense. It is in this surrender that they find strength, in obedience that they find freedom, and in faith that they find fulfillment. And so the story of Western minds turning to Islam is not just about conversion. It is about awakening, a rediscovery of what it means to be human, to be connected, to be alive in the deepest sense. As this spiritual awakening deepens, those who have embraced Islam begin to see that their journey was not just a personal discovery, but a divine calling. They realize that every doubt, every heartbreak, and every failure was part of a path that was leading them back to the truth. The emptiness they once cursed now becomes a blessing because it was that very emptiness that made them seek something beyond this world. They start to reflect on how society had taught them to suppress the voice of the soul, to drown it in entertainment, consumption, and constant distraction. But when all the noise fades, when success feels meaningless and pleasures lose their taste, That voice becomes impossible to ignore. It calls them back to their creator, to the one who designed their hearts and wrote their destinies. The Western world told them to look outward for meaning, in achievements, relationships, and validation, but Islam taught them to look inward. Where the light of faith resides, they discover that the peace they were chasing was never far away. It was hidden beneath layers of ego, pride, and illusion. And as they peel away those layers through prayer, reflection, and surrender, they feel reborn. Every act of worship becomes a moment of intimacy with Allah. Every verse of the Quran becomes a personal message, and every hardship becomes an opportunity for purification. They find beauty in simplicity and purpose in patience. What once felt like losing everything now feels like gaining what truly matters: peace, clarity, and eternal hope. In their new understanding, they begin to see the contrast between the fleeting nature of the world and the permanence of the hereafter. They understand that the modern obsession with pleasure, wealth, and status is nothing but a mirage. It promises satisfaction but delivers exhaustion. Islam lifts the veil from their eyes and shows them that true success is not measured by worldly standards, but by the state of the heart when it meets its Lord. This realization changes the way they live. They no longer compete in vanity, but in virtue. They no longer define themselves by the labels society gives them, but by their relationship with Allah. They begin to see others not as rivals, but as fellow travelers on the same journey toward truth. Their hearts, once heavy with anxiety, now beat with gratitude. Gratitude for every breath, every moment, and every trial that brings them closer to their Creator. They discover that peace does not mean a life without problems. It means having faith that every problem has a divine purpose. Even when they face ridicule or isolation for their faith, they stand firm because they now know who they are and whom they belong to. They no longer need to chase happiness. It follows them in every remembrance, every prayer, and every act of sincerity. The tranquility they once envied in others has now become their own reality, not because the world has changed, but because their hearts have. This transformation becomes a source of wonder for those around them. Friends, family, and colleagues begin to notice the calmness in their eyes, the light in their speech, and the dignity in their character. They start to ask questions. How can someone find peace in a world so chaotic? And it is through this quiet transformation that the message of Islam continues to spread. It is not through debates or arguments, but through the beauty of lived faith. The sincerity of a single believer can touch hearts in ways that words never could. The West, despite its material advancement, is slowly awakening to this truth that the answers it has been searching for in politics, psychology, and philosophy already exist in divine revelation. The growing number of Westerners turning to Islam is not a social trend, but a spiritual revolution, a return to balance, meaning, and peace. These individuals are not abandoning logic or reason. They are discovering a higher form of it, one that connects intellect to revelation. In their journey, they become bridges between two worlds, carrying the light of faith into societies that have forgotten its glow. Their presence becomes a living reminder that no heart is too lost, no soul too broken to return to its Creator. And so the story of Western minds turning to Islam is ultimately the story of humanity itself, a story of longing, loss, and return. It is the story of the soul remembering its origin after years of wandering. It is the realization that nothing in this world, no matter how beautiful or advanced, can replace the peace of being close to Allah. Every person who accepts Islam becomes a reflection of divine mercy, a testimony that guidance is still alive in the modern world. Through them, we see that the message of Islam is not confined by culture, geography, or time. It is a universal truth that speaks to every heart willing to listen. It calls humanity to rise above illusion, to see beyond the material, and to reconnect with the eternal. The West may have built empires of intellect, but now it seeks nourishment for the soul. And in that search, it finds Islam waiting, patient and unchanged, just as it has been since the beginning of revelation. The rise of Islam in the West is not a coincidence. It is destiny unfolding, a divine response to a world lost in chaos, a reminder that when every illusion fails, truth remains, and in that truth lies the peace every heart was created to find.